Welcome to NovoEDTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, learning strategists, and business leads. We hear about their experiences in the learning industry and predictions for the profession and the trends that they're seeing. But before we get started, a little bit about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric, capability-building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the center of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, Marriott International, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is felt, experienced, and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, let's meet our guest for today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast, a space for talent development trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk. I'm the producer of the NovoEDTalks podcast, and today I am joined by Ryan Samia. Ryan currently serves as the Director of Talent and Leadership Development for Tractor Supply Company's Store Support Center, Distribution Centers, Final Mile, and Pet Specialty. He has strategic and operational responsibilities for designing, delivering, and evaluating impactful programs to support team members and leaders across the various business entities. Ryan holds a Master of Arts in Industrial and Organizational Psychology from the University of West Florida and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of the Philippines. Prior to Tractor Supply, Ryan worked in the healthcare industry and has 10 years of progressive experience in learning, leadership development, employee engagement, and experience and coaching. He is also a certified professional co-active coach and very much passionate in empowering others to flourish and thrive. Ryan, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast.
Thanks, Melissa, and great to be here. And thanks for the invite.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by just introducing yourself a little bit more, talking about your role and, really the scope of learning and development you're responsible for today. You've obviously got quite a bit that you're covering in your role there.
Yeah, so I think it's an exciting time for that. For those who don't know Tractor Supply, so Tractor Supply is the largest rural retail lifestyle retailer rather here in the U.S. So the opportunity to serve different parts of the organizations from a learning and development is very interesting and meaningful. Where I have the opportunity and my team to work with your traditional corporate side, which is our store support center. So think of that from roles in finance, marketing, HR, IT, right? And then also members of my team support our distribution centers, all right? So we have about 10, soon 11 soon, right? So think of it from the different type of working environment, learning disciplines, and even how you build and accelerate growth and development. And then we also have your pet specialty, so which is a very a great time to be a tractor from a pet specialty standpoint. Of just again, we have about 206 stores from a Pet Sense by Tractor Supply. So again, that's even another layer of mindset and the way you deliver development for stores, and for folks who are quoted the traditional frontline. So it's a great time. So we have the opportunity to touch across the different organizations within Tractor.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are there any, with all of those different kind of learners in different roles, are there any kind of like common challenges or pressures that they're all facing that's kind of really most present for you to be focusing on right now?
Yeah, I think it's probably common to just learning and development professionals in general that, especially in today's age where I believe it's no longer about the consumption of content, right? Because content is everywhere, right? You probably have seen that, Melissa, right? Where you go left, there's this content and a platform, and if you go the another way, you can consume it, right? I think one of the challenges that just in general we're facing, two things. One will be the time, right? So we are very much a growth organization, so folks who are in the traditional store support center may, having that a little bit of flexibility for commitment to growth versus someone who's on the floor, right? So having the ability to do that differently, so time is an aspect. The concept of how do you integrate learning in the flow of work, right? The second, I think, will be the application, right? We, just like a lot of other organizations, we still have your formal programming standpoint, but then how do you apply that after the traditional quote unquote event or workshop? So I think that's the ongoing application and reinforcement mechanisms is something that we're continually working on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right in that that is very much so kind of across the board a challenge that everyone's faced with there. And I like that you mentioned like content consumption too, because I think that's something that comes up a lot as well in a lot of different ways. But Ryan, if you think about the ideal state of learning or talent development, at your organization, what does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, I think ideal state. I would say it might be a cliche now, but that learning becomes just part of work, right? That it's not an on the side thing. Um, and I get that, right? I think also three things. So I was reading something on LinkedIn the other day where there is this notion training and learning it are, training is not learning and so on. But every all of them has a place, right? We still need to have dedicated time for training. That's the formal training. You sit down, you watch an e-learning, or from a leadership development standpoint, you still do an hour, a full day workshops or whatever that program's like, right? But I think we also need, from an ideal state, we also need to look on the learning side, which is how do you apply what you are trained on? And sometimes that application doesn't happen really in the formal, event, if you will. So how can we create mechanisms for that, whether it's your manager having the ability to coach? So I think that's another piece here is managers coach instead of simply supervise, right? And how can they really be agile? And I think the third piece from a talent development is more long term, which is the development piece, right? That sometimes you cannot measure that right now, right? The impact of your learning needs to wait a little bit because you cannot measure the behavior change after an event or after a program. So that will evolve over time. So to me, the ideal development or talent development really looks at those three things, right? Training is still a core component. How do you learn and what are the mechanisms? And then there is truly the development and impact.
I love that, and I love what you said there about, having to wait a little bit because I think sometimes we're just so we want things so instantly and it's like, "Oh, how did this affect things?" Like, right away, and it's like true, like, impact does take a while, so we need to remember, I feel like, to be a little bit patient when it comes to that, to see that. Now, Ryan, what would you say, is the biggest where do you still feel the biggest gap is between that kind of ideal state and how you all are operating today?
Yeah, I think it's that knowing versus doing, right? It's one thing to know and it's one thing to learn. Um, you can attend all the classes, you can attend all the e-learnings, right? And we you can be a frequent flyer of all training and development programs. But are you actually applying it, right? And that takes two things. One, your support system, of course, and in an organization like Tractor, how do we create and reinforce an environment that doing an application will come to life, right? That's one. But I think more than that is also the motivation of the individual, right? So I can read a book, but if I'm not taking time to apply it, or if I'm not choosing, right? Because I would say it's a choice. If I'm not choosing, hey, what's that one behavior after a 2 day workshop, if you will, that I will start doing differently? I think it's still the gap. So it's that knowing versus doing. Um, and I think the other piece, Melissa, that I even often hear in our programs, in our, especially from a leadership development standpoint, more on your soft skills or human power skills, is the ability to reflect, right? Because you already mentioned it. We're kind of always on the go and we're so busy. Um, but I hear our participants sometimes, oh, that was a good 30 minute of just reflection. Because in our day to day, we don't really do that. I would say it's a gap, but we're trying to not solve for that, but we're creating spaces for that for reflections.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. I wish we all had like more time to just reflect.
I know.
Like, like what just happened, you know? I feel that a lot in my day to day.
And reflect not just when it's a bad thing, right? Even if something went right, you need to reflect and, oh, as a leader or as whoever, as a team member, what did I do well in that instance? Or what were the skills that I or strengths that I brought up to solve that project or address safety concerns or, provide that legendary service to our customer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, now, how are you thinking about designing learning experiences to ensure that, you make space for this reflection? Because I feel like that kind of answers, how you make sure that learning actually sticks, right? Are you designing to make space for reflection? You talked a little bit about like coaching, which I think has become really powerful to ensure that learning actually sticks. But what are some other things that you're looking at or doing?
Yeah, I think you used the word experience, right? So the way we look at it, or at least personally for me, I want to make sure we design for an experience and not just necessarily for a class or a course. Some may say that semantics, but even that, just the mindset. Oh, I'm here, right? I'm here to come in for an experience, whether it's virtual, because from time to time we still do virtual engagements and offerings, right? It's just the nature of our work. So that's why I'm thinking of it as an experience. And I think the question you have on how it sticks, and there is a recent book that went out, Learning That Sticks. And to me, it's before you move into like what activities and so on, you need to focus on what are the behaviors or actions you want to be different, right? And not really different, because again, you cannot force change that you want to influence on your participant. So having that, what do I want to see differently after an e-learning or even after a 1 year program or for executive development? I think I often start with that. And then from there, what I've found practically speaking in terms of how learning sticks or even create time for reflection, I'm a big fan of peer learning groups, or sometimes we call them your accountability pods. Like, right. So breaking the class or the cohort, whatever the case might be, in smaller groups, and giving them, homeworks, whether that is, hey, make sure you meet once or a couple times before our next workshop, if it is a cohort based programming, as an example, right? So that's one. The second piece from an e-learning, so let's say if you are building an e-learning, really build it with intention, right? Just don't go through the flow of clicking here and there and then watching a video and knowledge checks, which knowledge checks are important, but create space somewhere in between for, hey, here's what you've learned so far or what you've read and watched. What does that mean for you or to you as an individual, right? So I think that's the second piece. um, the third piece to me that we've started doing and really trying to hone in more and increase that muscle is the manager involvement and the support, right? Because yeah, so that's where really, um, I often look into it like if a participant attends a program, right, and then their next touch base or conversation with their leader, it is of course the participant, responsibility to share here are my insights. But as a leader, you also need to be aware that, hey, Melissa, I know you attended this program or this course. Let's talk about it. What insights did you get from it, right? Or what behaviors or what habits did you learn that I can help you in your day-to-day work? So I think that's the other bridge to make sure that learning sticks.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all of those. I love, 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 love the phrase accountability pods. I wrote that down. I'm like, I think that's like so, so good. And we're seeing a lot of the importance of accountability just in general with a lot of this stuff and what that means. It's not, I think it can mean a lot in a lot of different ways when it comes to learning and development for, the leaders and for the learners. Like, are we being accountable? Both. Do you have any kind of like signals that you look for that tell you, oh, this learning is like folks are really engaged with this learning and they're really like taking it and applying it? Do you have things that you look for? Are there metrics you look at?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, sometimes the impact is not immediate, right? So I'd say that a couple signals, we still follow your traditional Kirkpatrick, right? From evaluation and what's working, what's not working. So definitely level one and two of, did people enjoy it, your satisfaction, and did they what did they like the most? We're also moving into more of your knowledge and behavior, where level of confidence we started to measure that, especially from a programmatic, some of our more formal programmatic leadership development standpoint, right? So for example, we have one which is our aspiring leader program. So at the start of the program, here are maybe 10 skills that we expect, the behaviors, which goes back to earlier. We identified the behaviors that are important. And then rate your confidence level, right, into this program. And then after 3 months, at the end of the program, I know it's still self assessment, but I think the, over the past 2 or 3 years, one will argue, well, right, yeah, their level of confidence went up. But on the flip side, maybe their level of confidence went down. And that's not a bad thing to me either. That might also signal, oh, maybe they are clearer on what delegation is. So before entering into the program, or they thought before entering into the program that leadership is X, and now they get more clarity and even self-awareness. So I can kind of argue it that way. So definitely assessments is the second one, from a signal that's working. The third one will be, from a organizational impact, of course, our internal mobility and your retention. Those are your key metrics that we also measure from internal movement, not necessarily from promotions, but even lateral movements, from our leadership development program specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I Someone else mentioned that recently on here too, is the confidence level, like checking in with people about that. Cause I think that can tell a lot of different, I think you can take a lot of different things away from that. So I like that one a lot. Ryan, shifting gears to skills, there's been a shift from, this soft skills to what many are calling, durable or power skills. Things like judgment, discernment, decision making. How is your team thinking about skills development, especially in the age of AI?
Yeah, I think if not all, but a majority or all L&D are, folks, and not just L&D, are talking into that, right? Um, one of our in one of our programs, I often say, Jacob Morgan. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. Jacob Morgan, who wrote the book The Future Leader. One of his mindsets in his book is called the chef mindset, if I'm not mistaken, where he talks about how do you balance human and technology. So it's like a chef, you need to balance. How do you balance all the ingredients? And kind of that's the same way. With the fast pace of AI, and not just AI technology in general, we don't need to lose sight of the human element. So I think I'll start with that. So I think to us, how we've navigated that, certainly that's why we're still and heavily investing on a lot of leadership development and human skills. So we started to really, from a programmatic standpoint, looking at true leadership development. And we also have your regular skills development that's more on your technical, such as AI, right? How do you enable people with AI? Finance, for example, your traditional hard technical skills, if you will. um, from our stores, for example, our product knowledge, that's still a skill in itself. So we're looking at those in that way, that we need to make sure we're offering both the technical, right? And then also the leadership development or human aspect of it. Um, so one thing you mentioned was around discernment and judgment, right? Even in one of our leadership programs, we're starting to elevate that by leadership in the age of AI. I don't have a perfect answer yet, but we're starting to really include elements of that, right? That as you are a leader now, you need to make sure your discernment is more important now, right? Your empathy, right? um and even your critical thinking skills need to shift as well. So we're in the, I'd say, for similar to other organizations, we're on the roadmap and pathway to how do we balance those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that everyone's kind of trying to, and for certain roles too, there still are technical skill sets that they need to understand and to be able to do. And I'm sure, especially with your group of learners, there some roles there are still more technical skills that are not going away just because of AI or the advancements of technology. So I think balancing that, especially for someone like you, can be a challenge, and thinking to the future. So thinking a little bit more about AI, is AI part of your learning strategy today? And if so, where are you seeing the most value?
I think it is. So definitely we, just like other organizations, I would say we're even a little bit ahead. Since last year on our AI learning journey, and we're almost a year into it. From having Open AI enterprise, if you will, from Open AI partnership and ChatGPT. So in terms of how it helps us, of course, two things. There will still be the being efficient and productivity for an individual standpoint, right? How can I make my work more efficient, and even within their teams and within their functions, if you will, right? As an organization, I think certainly, that's where we're heading. It's how do we make sure, what is the return on investment? um, how do we make sure technology, or AI in particular, is augmenting the work, right? And really complementing the work. Because I mentioned it's not going to replace the human element of it. If anything else, it will, humans and technology working against something or working together to drive efficiency. I would say that's where we're at. From a learning standpoint, we are in the process really of how do we, I want to call it like your 2.0, right? Because we've been on this journey for about a year, and we're now in the evolution of our efforts. How do we make sure we deepen our understanding and our adoption, both from a team member and from a leadership, for our leader standpoint as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've kind of been talking about it, but how are you thinking about, go a little bit deeper into how you're thinking about the trade-off between like efficiency and quality when it comes to AI, quantitative gains versus qualitative outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's one. It goes back to us as leaders. I often say, as a leader now, or even team members, your role is not just to take the output of whatever it is as true, right? As a fact. So that's where, to your point, the trade-off of the human element, the thinking, the critical thinking, even need if need to be more important than ever, right? Because I've heard, I think it was in another or a LinkedIn article where we've kind of started to see, oh, AI did this, or for example, Claude or Chat GPT created this, right? And they own that. Well, no, you did it. Right? Right? So even the change in mindset where I partnered with Chat GPT and created, or I consulted and I brainstormed with X, then that's you're still the human, you're still the thinking partner behind it. To me, even there's just a brief shift in that lexicon or how you talk about the tool. I think is a differentiator that, oh, you're actually leveraging it as a partner and you're not just trying to blame it, because at the end of the day you cannot blame it. You still have there's still the human element in it.
Yeah, no, I've seen that more and more too. Folks talking about like partnering, or it's this plus AI, human plus AI, and what we do from there. Do you have any kind of guardrails or, design principles that you use to ensure that AI enhances human learning and connection?
A couple of things. One, from a guardrail, definitely that um, what we provide is, or from a learning standpoint, rather, it's not a training alone, it's about behavior change. So if you attend an AI training, for example, and this is where our 2.0 is coming, is where we're heading. It's not just simply training, right? You make sure you can make change, or it's a behavior change out of that. So what do I mean? I may have attended a training on how to create a GPT, for example, right? But did you actually create a GPT to improve your work? That's two different conversations, right? Or you may have attended a training on prompting. What is your prompting giving you more time or to master that art? So it's not just training, but it's really the behavior change. So that's one. The other guardrail that we're looking at, or not really looking at, but reminding folks, is leaders need to adopt them, right? So, in order for it to be adopted by team members, leaders and managers also need to be champions and agents for it. So, how do we push and have continued to influence our leaders that they have a critical role in the process? And I think the third part of that is what I mentioned, is that just don't, take it as a fact. Whatever it spits out, or whatever tool that you have, you still need to have that human judgment.
No, absolutely. And I think that this is one that everyone's, struggling with, because we're still kind of like, I think a lot of people are still understanding, like, how can I use AI to enhance my job? Like, what parts of it can I use? And then understanding, like, we kind of have to play around with it a little bit. Like, ooh, that was not a good use of it, or like that didn't work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Right.
like, before we can like set organizational, only use it for this, only use it for this, it needs
Right.
more like high level guidelines, I think.
Right. I mean, for us in learning, we definitely use it, right? So whether that is creating coach, right? You creating the opportunity through, because I mentioned we have Chat GPT or OpenAI enterprise licenses, right? That now I can, let's say for our aspiring program I mentioned, we created a GPT that's kind of, I put all the content of the program in there, and then it becomes their, I would say, your journal slash coaching reflection. You're like, hey, I went through this program and here's what I'm doing, right? Or help me understand my DISC style. We use DISC, behavioral assessment, as an example, right? Or more recently, one part of the program is visioning for yourself. Like, I asked them to create a leadership billboard. So now that after they went through a 3-month program, create a billboard. So instead of your traditional flip chart, right? So, hey, using the tools that we have, but you enter all the prompts because that's still your story. Create a visual of who you are at the organization after 3 months, and then that's the human, or I'm sorry, that's the technology, and then they delivered 2 to 3 minutes presentation, so that's the human, because a billboard that was created by a GPT doesn't do justice. You still need to have that human element to it. So that's another example of how we're balancing both. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thinking about, learning and development just as an industry in general,
Yeah.
as we look to the future, the next few years, what do you believe that L&D and talent development leaders need to unlearn, and what do you think they need to double down on?
I think one, I may have mentioned this earlier, that training or learning and development doesn't necessarily mean we need to create more content, right? So I think it's probably that it's not just creating content anymore. What we need to double down, I think, two things. One is sense how can we help our learners and our organizations to quote unquote make sense or sense making, right? So because there's so many signals out there, right? There are so many stuff, content, processes, insights, experiences, but how do we help them make sense of what's around them? And how can we create an spaces where they look for patterns, if you will? So I think that's one. And the other piece, just because I love her work, Jess Amley, like straight like L&D. She has a book called L&D Order Taker No More by Jess Amley. That how do we become more truly strategic business partners, right? How do you learn the business and not operate just, hey, I'm learning. You need to be integrated into the business as well. It's not an off the side function. Um, so I think those two things we need to double down on, understanding whatever business you're in, right? Whether it's you're in retail, you're in healthcare, you're in finance or hospitality, and then the sense making component.
Absolutely. And I think I love what you said about like content too there, that we don't necessarily need like more content around everything,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
that's, a thing with AI where it's like we can produce more content quicker
Yeah.
or more efficiently now. It doesn't mean we should, because we're at
Right.
like
Yeah.
taking a step back and looking at that. Ryan, to close, what's one thing that you wish you had learned at the beginning of your leadership journey that you would go back and tell yourself now?
Ooh, during my leadership journey, I'd say it's one that I've just mentioned where a doubling down, like understanding. So um at the beginning you mentioned where I have oversight for multiple functions of the business, which is the corporate or our store support center, and then our distribution center, and then the stores through our pet specialty, right? Um, I wish I had studied more business. My background is in psychology, not necessarily business. So I'm learning that, right? I'm continually to, of course, as an L&D, you have to continually learn, but I wish I had dedicated more time on true business acumen, and that's full vulnerability there. Which I am continually working on it. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's a great lesson for folks just starting out on their journey. So,
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today on the NovoEd Talks podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
Well, thanks, Melissa, and again, thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of NovoEd Talks.